ahead, sir.
Welcome to town.
Good to be in town.
Thanks for the pizza and the pop.
You're welcome.
I'm Dr. Enneberg, a local retired MD. I really like your wife.
I do too. Thank you, Doc.
Good to see you again.
Bless you.
I had a brief visit with her down in Des Moines about a year ago at the annual meeting of the Islands Protector League. You were the keynote speaker.
Great.
And you were saying at that time that you never made any move without getting the go-ahead from the better half.
You got that right, brother.
And so I talked to her, and she was kind of political too. But I could read between the lines. I'm very good at that. And that she was going to run. And so she did say yes again.
That's right.
Good. But I'll be honest with you, I didn't hear any violations this morning of the 11th commandment of Ronald Reagan, but I read about it in the Des Moines Register. And that I didn't like, because we're all going to, when the dust settles, we're all going to have to be united, plus the independents, or you can never kick out an incumbent president or governor or anything else.
That's for sure.
So, another thing is I was just sitting here reading. I can still read even though I'm over 80. I like your stop spending points here, but I'll plead ignorance. I'm not familiar with two of them, about the Lean Six Sigma and impounding up to 5%. But I do like opposing the increase of the debt limit. Praise the Lord on that. And passing the balanced budget amendment that caps the spending at 18% of the gross national product. So, if you can kind of tell me a little about that Six Sigma.
Sure, I sure will. In fact, it leads right into a woman sitting right here in front of us. There's a group in Iowa called Strong America Now that is organizing a grassroots campaign, trying to get all the presidential candidates to support it. And it's a commitment to redesigning government so it's more efficient, more streamlined, quicker, lighter, more focused, more targeted, and better. The reason I'm so excited about it is because I use these principles in some of our agencies in Minnesota. One of the main tools is a process called Lean Six Sigma. It sounds kind of weird, but it's been around a long time. And it's been used in the private sector, and it works. And it's a label, a brand name for process redesign in organizations, businesses, nonprofits, government, and it really works. But you got to be committed to bringing people in who are trained in it. They in turn got to get their team trained, and when you apply it, it really works. And so I'm sure she would be able to give you more information. There's a book that she's got called What is Lean Six Sigma? You can get information on the line. But the short version is, it's basically streamlining process to be quicker, faster, more modern, lighter, less expensive, less burdensome. And it works. And it works. We did it in Minnesota. It works. And then on your question about
pounding the 5%.
Yeah, you know, in the proposal that the gentleman's talking about, we had, again, more specific proposals, but one aspect of it was to go back to what used to be the case, which is to give the president, by the way, I'd go all the way and say, give him or her the line item veto authority, but until about 30, 40 years ago, the President of the United States had what was called impoundment authority. So if the budget or the spending got out of whack, the president could impound funds, basically put them in escrow and not spend them until the financial picture of the country got fixed or better. And the Congress took that away in the mid-1970s, and unfortunately the president signed the bill to do that. But we're calling for a modified, a more modern version of impoundment that allowed the president to suspend spending under certain circumstances, up to a certain limit. Then on your question on the Reagan's 11th commandment, I concur, sir. We're going to have to be a united party. Whoever our candidate is, we're going to have to unite. There's going to be some differences between the candidates on policy, and I think it's fair to point those out. I don't think it should be personal. I think it should be accurate and kept to a minimum. What I've tried to say generically is, you know, whether it's Congresswoman Bachmann or anyone else, and there's been a little back and forth with her and me, I think it's just a basic common sense, not applied to her, but to anybody who wants to be president. And we put somebody in the office who's actually had executive experience. You know, I think that's a criteria for the position. At least in these challenging times. Yes?
You mentioned earlier in your talk about energy, and since it happens to be a thing that I've been working with for quite a few years, the Obama administration has proposed taxing energy to a greater extent than what it is now. And I would like to have your views on what this would have to do to the prices of energy for the average person and also job creation.
Well, I've strongly opposed the president's suggestion or proposal in that regard. And for those who couldn't hear, the question was about President Obama's proposal to raise taxes on energy. So he's proposed to eliminate some tax exemptions, credits, deductions, preferential treatments for certain aspects of the energy industry. Well, if you do that in isolation and you don't lower the tax rates, it's going to increase the cost of energy at a time when we can least afford it. It's a bad idea. None of us like tax increases to begin with, but it's a particularly bad idea now. It's always bad. But what I've said more broadly is I don't mind, as part of a larger reform where we reduce tax rates overall, cleaning out some of these special deals as long as it's a net tax cut or tax reform without tax increases being the net result. But that's not what he's proposing. He's proposing just going in and isolating and eliminating those without the corresponding tax rate reduction.
With respect
Sir.
to jobs, I think one of the largest detriments in this country is NAFTA and their allowance of outsourcing of labor. The classic example not long ago was Maytag. And 3,000 people lost their jobs because they found it more amenable to income if they go to Mexico. No, I think that's an area we should hit. If they want, people want more jobs, get rid of this, get rid of political correctness. That's the most asinine thing that has ever been advised on man, period. I wrote a letter to our senators and representatives and told them my opinion of that. If Rome undertook that philosophy, it would have not lasted 1,000 years.
Well, sir, great point. For those who couldn't hear it, it was partly about trade and NAFTA. It was also partly about jobs more generally. I should mention to you, if you don't know, I know the Maytag example in Iowa is a profoundly impactful and important impact or story and situation. But you should know my background because it relates to your question. I grew up in South St. Paul, Minnesota. Mary mentioned it, I think, in her remarks, it often does, but it was the home back then of the world's largest stockyards and some of the world's largest meat packing plants. So these were 4, 5, 6, 7-story, huge Swift and Armor facilities. They employed thousands and thousands of people directly and indirectly, and they all shut down pretty summarily in the late 60s and early 70s. So as a very young boy, I saw in my community, in the face of moms and dads, people who lost their jobs, had a very uncertain and unsettled future, and the worry that comes with not being able to take care of yourself or your family, not be sure about what's coming next. In my own family, my mom died when I was 16. She was a homemaker for much of her life, but she had ovarian cancer. And my dad, for a lot of his life, was a truck driver. And later in life, he got promoted to be a dispatcher and terminal manager. We thought we had hit the jackpot. But my dad, even for a while, lost his job not too much longer after my mom died. So when I was a teenager, I could see the face of some real challenge. And when your mom has passed on and your dad's unemployed, you get to make some choices in life about what you believe and what you grab onto. And so in my case, it was an opportunity to grab onto and dive into my faith. I really experienced the value and love of a family that was close-knit and rallied around in challenging times. I really saw the power of education. In my family, I was the first one able to go to college. When my mom was dying in her hospital bed, she called my brothers and sisters to her bedside. She didn't ask me to come. And she looked them in the eye and said, I want you to promise me that you will do everything you can to get him, meaning me, through school, because she wanted at least one of her kids to get on to college and complete college. And my brothers and sisters did the best they could. None of them ever went to college or graduated from college. And I share that story with you because, not for empathy, but everybody has a life story. And I think people want to know if you're going to be president, who are you? And where'd you come from? What do you believe? What'd you learn along the way? What's that based on? Have you walked in my shoes? Have you got your fingernails dirty? Because these last group of voters, they don't always decide just up here. They also want to know what do you got here, in your heart and in your gut. And so this background is not any better or worse than anybody else, but it's important. It goes to the issue of, have you experienced these kinds of situations, and have you seen it, and have you lived it? Now, more broadly, I'm for free trade, but I'm not for being a chump. And I think the American people and workers can compete with anybody if the rules are fair. But we've seen what happens when our country is not willing to stand strong and confront other countries or places when they don't play by the rules. And we got a lot of concerns in this regard. Again, I'm for free trade, but I'm not for being a chump. I'll spare you the long story, but I've been all over the world for lots of reasons many times, and there's a lot of abuses when it comes to what happens in trade between our country and other countries. And our federal government needs to stand up and challenge that. And one of the things we need to do that would help that is to get our own house in order. Because as it relates to China, for example, guess who buys most of our debt? China. You ever told off your banker when they hold the loans on your house or your business? Not the easiest thing to do, but we need to get tougher with China on these trade issues. And they respect strength. They don't respect weakness. And then very lastly, look, we got to have a place where businesses want to start and grow, right? There are 6 million businesses in the United States. 5.9 million of them, or so, have 500 employees or less. So if you talk about growing jobs and growing the economy, almost all of the focus needs to be on what can we do to get new and small and medium-sized businesses starting and growing, because that's where almost all the jobs are. Where almost all the businesses are. The big businesses are important in the sense that they're stable in many cases, but in terms of the job growth, the vast majority of it is in smaller, mid-sized businesses. And again, please read that speech I gave in Chicago, because it outlines in terms of business tax cuts, individual tax cuts, elimination of interest, dividends, estate tax, capital gains tax. If you did the things I outlined in that Chicago speech, our goal was to have not laggard, anemic, terrible growth like we have now, but exceptional growth for the American economy. And I'm confident, in fact I know, if you did what I suggested in that speech, and I'll do it as president, this economy will ignite. Sir?
Given our involvement in Afghanistan, Iraq, to some extent in Libya, given the entitlements, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, I'm having trouble understanding how anybody's going to cut taxes and balance the budget.
Sure. Well, first of all, let me compliment you on your very dashing summer suit there. That's again, everybody's going to say they can do it. I've actually done it. As the governor of Minnesota, one of the most liberal. I love my state, but it's pretty liberal. As a conservative, I probably cut more money, per capita or proportion out of the budgets than most people in the country, including everybody else running in the race. So I know a little bit about this. One of the things I learned is if you want to change culture, you want to change behavior, and you want to change budgets, you got to draw lines in the sand, especially if you're the executive. So I had the first government shutdown in a 150-year history of my state. I set a record for issuing vetoes, single season and one of the most in the history of the state. And I used executive authority to take more money out of the spending budget in Minnesota in my 8 years as governor than all 142 years worth of governors combined. The reason I share that with you is this. The next president's going to do some very difficult things. They better be the kind of person who has the experience and the judgment, like I have tried to explain to you, to be able to do what I just described. Now, please know where the money goes. The government takes in about $2.2 trillion federally, and they're spending $3.5 trillion. So as you sit here for lunch today, they will spend $144 million in 1 hour that they don't have. And that happens every hour, every day, every week, every month, all year long. It is out of control. They are running a Ponzi scheme. If they were in the private sector, they should be indicted for this kind of behavior. Tongue in cheek in that regard, but it is a Ponzi scheme. So we got to fix it. Here's where the money goes. The red part of the pie chart, Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, interest on the debt, a few other programs in terms of total federal outlays. It's already over the halfway line. The rate at which that stuff's growing, it's over the 3/4 line within 15 years. Almost all the rest is defense. So we got to tell some pretty hard truths. And I've been going around the country saying I'm going to tell everybody the truth. I came here to Iowa and said as part of these larger reforms of lowering tax rates, we're going to have to get rid of everybody's special deals, or as many of them as we can. That's why I said over time we're going to have to phase out ethanol subsidies. Not picking on ethanol, not picking on Iowa. I'm just saying given the deep hole we're in, we have to. And so there's some candidates just skipping Iowa because they don't think they can say what I just said and compete here, or partially skipping Iowa. I just said it. And I think we're going to do well now. We went down to Florida and talked about Social Security reform with the next generation. We'll keep our promises to everybody who's on the program. We'll hear it now, but my daughter Anna, by the way, is with me. She's 18, and she's going to be coming into the full-time workforce hopefully after she finishes her education, part-time in the meantime. But I said, honey, look, for anybody who's on the program now or anywhere near eligibility, we made a promise to you, we'll keep it. But Anna, I love you, sweetie, but we're telling you now, plan now, your retirement age is going up over time. So for Anna, we're going to gradually raise the retirement age gradually over time, but we're giving her 2-3 decades worth of notice to plan accordingly. Those are the kinds of changes we're going to have to make, and there's many examples of that, but we've laid it all out in pretty good detail. And it's not easy, it's not popular. The next president's going to have to do some very difficult things, draw some lines in the sand. Again, everybody's going to say they will do it. I've actually done it. Sir?
Family budgets and business budgets have to be balanced. And if it gets out of balance, we have to do something with it right now. And all this stuff we're hearing now is these cuts over 10 years.
Right.
A family budget, a business budget can't last 10 years if they put it off. They've got to cut right now. So what can you do to cut stuff now? Because I don't think this budget or the economy will last 10 years if they wait 10 years to cut it.
Now, they need to do everything they can to make dramatic and bold cuts, and the cuts we need are not in the billions, they're in the trillions. And this nibbling around the edges isn't really going to get the job.
What that comedian said, $1 billion here and $1 billion there, pretty soon you're talking about real money.
Yeah, that's right.
And so, I mean,
That's right.
that's a start.
Yeah, so you got to go where the real money is, and I got a whole set of proposals for it. Let me give you some examples. On Social Security, keep all the benefits just where they are for anybody who's of eligibility now or anywhere near eligibility, but for the next generation, we're going to raise the retirement age gradually over time, and then we're going to have to do another thing, which is not popular, it's not easy to say, but we got to do it. As it relates to people who are wealthy, I don't like class warfare, so I don't, if somebody's wealthy or successful in America, great, we applaud them. But in the future, for people who are wealthy, we're not going to, under my proposal, give you your cost of living adjustment, but if you're middle income or lower income, you will. And then for new people coming into the system, we'll give you the option to stay in the traditional system or to have individual accounts with some guidance around it. On Medicaid, we have to shut off the autopilot spending increases that occur, quote unquote, automatically. Cap at a level we can afford, make Congress appropriate that level every year, and then block grant the whole program to the states. On Medicare, it's a much longer answer, and your eyes will glaze over, and even the doctor will get tired of what needs to be done. But it's long and involved, but here's a couple of the short version directions. We have to pay providers for better health care outcomes and quality. Right now, they get paid for volumes of procedures, which is fine. We want to pay people fairly, but we want to make sure we pay them for actually people getting better, not just the volumes of procedures. And there's a whole reform, and we started this in powerful ways in Minnesota around giving providers, doctors, hospitals, clinics, bonuses if they not just crank out volume, but actually make people better, make them better quicker, and have better health. And it's a very powerful tool. So it tries to get market forces from the providers, but it also begins to inform consumers, patients, about where good health care is. And most of the money in health care is in 5 big chronic conditions, and they include obesity, cancer, diabetes, heart disease, and a couple others. If you have one of those chronic conditions, where you go get your care matters a ton in terms of the health care outcomes. And most people don't know that. Understandably, it's a very complex system. So the more we can get consumers information about the quality of care, particularly if they have a condition that I just described, And I'm not talking about little bits of differences. If you have congestive heart failure or you have type 1 diabetes, where you go get your care can affect your healthcare outcomes and the cost by not just 2%, but 10, 20, 30, 40%. Consumers don't know that. You start putting information in their hands about those kinds of marketplace measurements, and guess what happens? They start migrating to better places with better outcomes and oftentimes more efficient. And so those are the kinds of, some of the ingredients of healthcare reform. So I'll give you an example in Minnesota. Again, this gets long, but if you have type 1 diabetes in Minnesota, we did a survey of who's getting Mayo Clinic level care for their type 1 diabetes. And by the way, it's a very serious condition. If it's undertreated, maltreated, mistreated, as the doc knows, it can lead to all kinds of morbidity. It can lead to organ transplants, amputations, things that are terrible for the patient, but awfully extremely expensive as well. And so the more people you can get to kind of world-class or Mayo Clinic level treatment for type 1 diabetes, it's better for them, health-wise, they get better treatment, but it also is helpful because you avoid all the expensive procedures. So we started saying to the folks in Minnesota, if you can get more of your patients to Mayo Clinic level results, we'll pay you more. And so we start paying bonuses for not having 8% of your patients at Mayo Clinic levels, but 10, 20, 30, 40. And guess what? Patients were happier, better health, better results. Another quick example, our state employees, they're unionized. They pay part of the health care premiums. We pay the bulk of it as their employer. Everybody was worried about how fast the costs were going up, so we started a new system with the agreement of the unions. We said, look, you can go anywhere you want for your health care. Free choice. But if you go somewhere really expensive with bad results, you're paying more. And if you go somewhere less expensive with good results, you'll pay less. Guess what happened? 80% of the state employees picked plans and providers that were higher in quality, lower in cost, and the healthcare premiums are dramatically below market in that risk pool compared to the healthcare economy as a whole. So those are long answers, but know that those are the kinds of changes that we're going to have to make in these programs, and that's where the bulk of the money is. You want to know the number one thing that's driving government budgets faster than anything else, school districts, counties, state, federal government, it's healthcare. And the tragedy, one of the tragedies of Obamacare, amongst the many tragedies, is it didn't fix the problem at all. It made it worse. And we'll do healthcare reform the right way when I'm president. I'm getting the hook. I just want to say thanks for coming. And again, with Iowa, you have this wonderful deserved role of being first, but I want to encourage you again, not to just be first, but to be right. And I believe if you really look at this thing all the way, not just at one moment in time, but all the way to the end destination, which is beating Barack Obama, that you'll conclude that my candidacy is the one that you will support. I certainly hope that's the case. I certainly hope you'll come to Ames and help us out. And thanks for coming to the Pizza Ranch and have lunch.
And speaking of Ames, we have cards here for you guys to fill out so we can get you more information. We're going to be having a bus coming from Carroll going straight to Ames. So myself and a couple of the other interns are going to be passing these cards out. We'd love for you to be able to fill it out and join us in Ames.
Great, thanks. Thanks for coming out, sir. Appreciate it.
Okay, that's right.
First time seeing you.
Yeah, he's gone.